Hello? Hey everybody, it's Catherine. Welcome back to my channel. If you're new here and you don't quite know why you're watching a video on career advice from a YouTuber, well, I like to keep my life a little bit maniacal and juggle a full-time 9-to-5 job in tech sales with social media. Not quite sure which one I'm doing better at the moment, and also whether or not you should take my advice as credible, but we're just gonna jump into it because when I opened up Instagram and asked you all for your questions, I received probably 5 times the amount of questions that I expected. Like, we all need some help right now. We just do. First question, are you still planning to move to Seattle, and would you ever move for work? I have been kicking the can down the road on Seattle for quite a long time, and it ends here. Like, the buck stops here. I simply have to do it. I have lived in California my whole life, and I need to make an exit before I become too normie and before my California elitism takes over too completely. And now that I don't have a lease tying me down and I'm officially working remote through June of 2021, I talked about it with my manager in our last check-in and she was supportive of it. So the doors seem kind of open to it. So first part of 2021, I will be moving to Seattle, and this is my way of holding myself accountable. And I'll see you guys in the Pacific Northwest. As a new grad with a demanding first job, how do I set work-life boundaries? Similarly, how to maintain balance and enjoy your 20s while working towards professional goals. Above all else, this is like the one skill that I can say I've concretely worked on. Here's my step-by-step guide of setting boundaries, certified and verified by my therapist, tried and tested. It's changed my life, and I'm not kidding. Step number 1 is to script out, template out, print out your exact lines that you will deliver when you are at wit's end, your bandwidth is maxed out, you physically cannot take on one more thing, and someone's still trying you. In the spirit of collectivism, I'm going to drop my lines down below of what I use. It usually sounds a little bit something like, I would love to help, but I have 7 things ahead of this right now. Can you ask someone else? Or I can fit in step 1, but then I'll have to hand it back to you for the rest. But here's the thing with setting boundaries. Not only do you have to tell that person straight away, I have this to do, I can't do it, like one of those lines. Once you deliver that line, the crucial thing with boundaries is that people only know where the boundary is once they test it. So if you set it and they say, well, I have a million things on my plate too, can you just take this one thing on? Then you're like, shit, it didn't work, and now I just have to give in. No. That is the most important step in boundary setting, is the point where you're reaffirming the boundary, reestablishing the boundary, not opening the gate, the fence is shut, like you're not doing it. And obviously there's softer ways to set boundaries and more firm ways, so I'll leave those up to you within those templated lines. But one of the challenges I had to get over was that I was worried that once I set boundaries and said I can't do everything and I can't go above and beyond, that people would immediately discredit me. I'm already a young woman in tech sales. Suddenly they'd see my brand in a whole different way, and they would basically just toss me out and no longer respect me. But surprisingly enough, and my therapist did give me the heads up, God bless you, Laura, is that people actually respect you more when you set boundaries, because suddenly they're well aware of how much work you have on your plate. Like, nobody can read your mind. Nobody really knows what exactly your schedule looks like. And also, the times where I have pushed it back on that person to accomplish that task, or only done one part of it and given them the rest, whereas usually I do all of it, is that then they appreciate when they're working on it. They go, wow, this is actually a lot more work than I expected. I'm so used to having Catherine do it all the time, and now by doing it themselves, they're like, shit, now I appreciate when she does it for me even more. How long did it take for you to adjust to post-grad life? I would say I had a mild version of imposter syndrome for like the first 6 months, where I was like, I don't know what I'm doing. I don't think I'm cut out for this. And it took me a solid 6 months. I started my job July 31st. And then by like January, I would say, I'd settled in and felt a lot more comfortable. But that's obviously dependent on the job, and also work from home. I would probably push that timeline out a little bit longer. What are some must-haves at your home desk? Okay. Unfortunately, I did attend this like workshop where there was a Berkeley professor who basically studied focus and the science of focus, and she said that your desk should have nothing on it besides like your laptop, keyboard, monitor, mouse. Like it should have nothing on it. I can't live my life that way, you know? I have to have my personality infused into my workspace. It is just one of my neuroses. And I think plants, I was working without real live plants next to me for 2.5 years, and now just looking over there, breathing in some oxygen feels good. And also turning your desk towards a window. I think a lot of us work with our desks right up against a wall. I recently moved my desk in front of a window, and I'm actually working from Montana right now, and out the window is this beautiful mountain. And so having that to look out to and refresh your mind is very important. So plants, light, natural light, and then I have this little hanging disco ball that reflects afternoon light. And usually afternoons are my slumpiest, most dreadful times of day. So having the afternoon light like stream across my desk just makes your life that much more romantic, that much more poetic. Working from home will never be a movie, but that's what I strive for. Do you ever think about pivoting but don't want to go back to square one? Yes and yes. It certainly weighs in my mind that like if I switch careers away from sales, you effectively start off like back at that entry level role. And then for many of us might feel like those years you'd worked up in that one field may have been a waste. But recently, with all this time that I'm sitting at my desk alone and not talking to my coworkers for 8 hours a day, it's come to my attention that like our careers are long. Like if I live until I'm 85 years old, which who knows, I will have a solid 60 years of a career. And to think about like working my way up until I'm like 30, 35, and then just like doing that same thing for another 25 years, like that scares me more than pivoting. Like when I put it into that context, I was like, I genuinely think I would prefer to switch around and have multiple careers than to just like stick to one path. Sunk cost fallacy, you know, like you've already done it for 3 years, might as well just stick to it for another 60. Like, no. So cut that mentality out, easier said than done, but like I would try to reframe it that way if possible. But again, like, what do I know? Do you want to stay in the tech industry for the long term? Do you want to climb up the sales ladder, or are you more interested in other departments? Do you see yourself staying in corporate or exploring nonprofit or entrepreneurship? Either we are all riding the same mental wavelength here, or you guys just know me like far better than I ever expect you to. Yeah, I think when I first was graduating from college and I was like surrounded by the LA entertainment industry, tech seemed so ideal because it's just a much more, the way I described it was like cushy. I don't know if I would describe the tech industry as cushy. I think that might be a little dishonest to the whole enterprise, but like tech does have benefits, right? Like I don't receive a lot of these, but like a lot of times it's free breakfast, lunch, and dinner. You know, it's huge work from home budgets. It's a ton of unlimited PTO and stock options. And like they definitely will expend more resources to make you feel supported. But ethically, I'm in no way saying like the tech industry is like the most elite, wonderful, inspiring place to be. Like it is what it is. I'm not anchored to the tech industry. I'm glad that I started out here. It is like my background. It's what I know because my parents have always worked in tech, so it felt comfortable from that perspective, like being fresh out of college and being so lost in the world. Now I definitely am open to like a lot of other industries. Nonprofit is something that I always wanted to go into. Like I really remember middle school, high school, like working in a nonprofit, like World Wildlife Fund, Sierra Club, like now it's Sunrise Movement or the Gravel Institute, like working at some sort of NGO or nonprofit has always been in the back of my mind, but then I never really like acted on that. I think because I thought that the tech industry's values like aligned like good enough. And I'll get into that with the next question. But I do see myself switching around, maybe staying tangential to the tech industry, climbing up the sales ladder. Like, no, I don't see myself in sales at age 50. Like, I don't want to be like the chief sales officer, like the VP of enterprise sales. Like, I never aspired to that role. And I don't think that's like a hot take because just as I've like shadowed people in my career, seeing what goes into those levels and the amount that you have to sacrifice in your personal life. Like I'm an ambitious person, but ambition's not siloed to your career, right? Like I can be ambitious about creating innovative content, like editing videos, editing photos, doing embroidery, like becoming a better hiker, like all of these things you can be ambitious about. And I don't want my career to dominate my life. I'd much rather be like an individual contributor with like a lot of other really fulfilling things in my life than be a VP and that be my like dominating identity, if that makes sense. So I'm not as crazy about moving up the ladder as I used to be. Okay, these next clump of questions I got, y'all. I'm really afraid that I'll be using my talents to make the world a worse place in the long run. Do you ever feel uncomfortable about working in tech and the capitalism of it? Ever feel like your work is doing nothing for the greater good? How to handle? LOL, I'm struggling. Any thoughts on balancing waiting to make a difference with other aspects of a career? Let's freaking talk about it, guys. We're on the same damn page here. Like this year, more than any, I've been much more rapidly radicalized. It almost seems difficult to not have been radicalized at least a little bit living through this year. It makes me hopeful that so many of you are concerned about this. I know that millennials and Gen Z like always get slapped with this label that like everything we need to do needs to have a social impact attached to it. But I'm like, why isn't that the case for the rest of the generations? Like, why is that even a defining characteristic? I'm of the belief that that should be integral to like everybody. But that being said, like 3 years ago when I was graduating college, like social impact and environmental impact and racial justice impact and like all of these topics went by the wayside because I was just worried about looking successful and finding something that fit my financial goals and something that had a lot of mobility and career mobility. And now I'm in this mode where I'm like, damn, like to feel truly plugged into your work, especially when you're so isolated and working alone, you really want to be working towards something that at the end of the day has an impact beyond yourself. Like I'll say it, and a lot of my coworkers said it, like it was and should have been very difficult to work during the heat of the Black Lives Matter protests because it's hard to feel like upholding the economy and maximizing your productivity matters more than human lives. Living through the civil unrest, the environmental unrest, social unrest, racial unrest, like it's hard to feel like just funneling capitalism and just getting your bag and like just putting in the hours when it's not directly making people's lives better. Like it's hard. And yes, every company has a mission. Like Dyson fans like makes really sick ass fans that work better than anything else and are more beautiful and are more functional. But like, would I feel fulfilled like selling or marketing fans to people to purchase for a lot more money than they need to be sold for? Like, no. So that's just a little window into like my brain. I think so many of us have had this like collective awakening as to like where you fit and like your part. Thoughts on hustle culture and how to break out of it. Do you think it's realistically possible? Definitely wanted to answer this question because I personally feel responsible for feeding into hustle culture. I think a lot of my videos in college and in the last couple years have fed into like push yourself as hard as you can and like be the best student or employee that you possibly can and like just do everything to the maximum amount and like really perfect your work and throw yourself into that. And hustle culture is just a really pithy way to say capitalism. Like it's been hard for me to distinguish between what is my natural ambition and what is capitalism just pushing me to do. Like, why do I care so much about being so productive all the time when in fact we're doing great? Like human productivity is up like 250% since the 1980s. I'm gonna fact check myself while editing, but despite that huge jump in productivity, we have seen no more pay for our labor. Like our labor and our higher productivity is no more valuable today than it was 40 years ago. That just doesn't sit right with me, and it shouldn't sit right with you either. Like it's kind of frustrating to just feel like you always have to be hard on yourself for not being productive enough, when in fact it's like you're being too productive for like what the labor market has been paying. Like existing is enough. And anytime you feel bad for being unproductive, that is just capitalism in disguise, and you shouldn't feel bad. Like your job is not your life. Like that's a huge thing to recognize, especially this year as thousands of Americans have had their lives turned upside down when they've lost their job because our healthcare, housing, our well-being rests on our jobs. Like, it is that serious when you lose your job. And if you're someone that like pins your whole fulfillment and identity and worth on your job, and then that falls out from under you, that's like such a hard place to be in. So I think the more this year, deriving off hustle culture, can separate our worth and our identity from how tirelessly we pour hours into our job, the better. I want to encourage you all to rest a lot more and not be so tethered to like just absolutely letting everything go for your job, because that's not fair to you, and it shouldn't be expected. To that point, I got a lot of questions about those of you that are juniors, seniors, graduating soon, you have no idea what to do with this job market, or maybe like you're just stuck in your career and you want to make a switch and you just don't really know where to get started. I can't be your personal LinkedIn and your personal ZipRecruiter and like hook it up, but I did partner with one of my favorite brands, if I'm allowed to have favorite brands, and that's EF English First. So EF English First approached me and really introduced me to the job opportunities they have available. They are hiring now for English teachers abroad in China, which, if you didn't know, I actually interned in China the summer after my freshman year in Shanghai, and I am very nostalgic for it. Like, for some reason this year, nostalgia has washed over me. This is one way that you can be fully sponsored with a visa to work abroad. They figure out the flights for you, they help you with the housing, they get you all the certificates you need. Really well established, takes a lot of the stress of figuring out an international move off of you. I did have the chance to talk to one of their recruiters more about how that actually works, if any of you are interested, and personally, I'm also interested. So let's roll it back to past Kath.
First question I just wanted to ask you is, could you just explain your role and then maybe like how you got into this role?
So my journey with EF was starting as a teacher in Guangzhou for kids and teens. So I did over a year of teaching with kids and teens down south, and then moved to Shanghai to become a recruiter. And that's how I got to be in this spot now.
What point did you hear about that job and then ultimately decide to apply?
So to start with, I didn't really have much teaching experience, almost none, before I started. Really, I was job searching, thinking about going abroad. So I wasn't in a concrete place in my own mind about what I wanted to do for the next step. I knew that I wanted to travel. Like, definitely knew I wanted to head back out into the world, you know, get a more global perspective. I knew I enjoyed working with kids, so that was something I thought would be fine. And I knew there would be theatrical aspects of that. Being able to do that with job security, it was paramount for me. We try to make everything as clear as possible. We have a lot of different support systems. We have a whole visa department. We have government relations that get the most up-to-date information about what's required. And so a lot of support there.
Thanks to EF for popping in this video. Personally, I wish I had evaluated working abroad sooner, because if you do that fresh out of college, like, what a way to establish your career and what a way to grow. So if you're interested at all, I would give it a shot and fill out the application. I have a link in my description to do so. There is no path set in front of you. There is no one way to approach your career. Whether you want to retire early, take a gap year at age 30, like go live in the countryside on a collective farm. I'm gonna hand it back to my therapist, but she reminded me, like, no one's on their deathbed like, damn, I wish I'd just skipped that vacation so that I could put in those 80 hours. Yes, you should be content with what you do, but I've started to question whether like I should be pinning all of my fulfillment monogamously on my career rather than allowing like my career to be one piece of the story. That's where I'll end it. If you have more questions, put them in the comments. Honestly, I probably would respond to them more readily in my Instagram DMs. Thank you all so much for watching. I'll see you all next time, and Katherout.